Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual insider session. I'm Brad Stevenson. I'm an SVP here at Level. We are a digital marketing agency focused on AI-powered full funnel growth for our clients. And today it's pretty hard to talk about full funnel growth without talking about the full search experience. And so what we're digging into here today is specifically the AI search visibility component of that full funnel strategy. So, someday when the robots take over, we are going to be trying to hide from them. Today, we want to be found by them. We want to be visible. We want them to elevate us. Optimus Prime would never take us over. He's our protector. But today, it's critical they know exactly where we are, where the brands are, and that they can deliver us directly to customers and prospects when key questions are being asked. As we all know, the search experience has changed dramatically over the past several years, starting with tools like Siri, with another tool that I will not name because it will activate here, Google Home. Searches are getting longer and more conversational. Since 2018, the average search query length has nearly doubled. So people are asking more natural questions and expecting more natural answers. And that trend has really only accelerated with tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and Google AI overviews. And users are now getting answers from many places, not just a list of links. So search, as we all know, used to be fairly linear. You would search for something, you would click something, you would get on a website, and you would either buy or not buy or submit a lead or not. Today, it's much more circuitous, much more complex. People ask long questions, they get answers, they dig deeper, they ask follow-ups, and then hopefully at some point, they do make their way to a site to convert. With all of that said, we're not here to talk theoretical. We all know this stuff. We're here to talk actionable, relevant things that you can use immediately to start growing your brand's visibility in AI search results. So with that, I would very much like to introduce our panelists for today. We're joined by Stacy Hubeck, AVP here at Level and our SEO lead, as well as Ben Gross, Head of Partnerships and Growth at Profound, which is one of the leading AI visibility platforms and a partner of ours, and Jasman Singh, an AI strategist at Profound. So welcome to the three of you. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. To kick things off, I have a question for all of you, and I'll start with Stacy. How has the definition of search visibility changed with AI-generated answers versus traditional SEO? Stacy, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, was trying to block out the dog. Okay, so visibility today really depends less on the ranking position that you have and much more on whether or not your content can be directly used or cited to answer questions. That I think is probably the biggest change.
Cool. Jasman, Ben, want to weigh in there as well?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I think in the traditional search world, maybe just to go a little deeper on what Stacy's saying, the game used to be show up in the top 3 positions on the Google SERP. 70% of all click-through rates go to those top 3 positions. And, people sort of fought violently to get in those 3 set positions. And today, the ChatGPT response is the new SERP, right? So it doesn't actually matter where you rank on Google. ChatGPT doesn't care about any of that. And so the nature of the game has totally changed. And I think people are starting to see that.
Cool. Ben, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think if we think about just the overarching change, and something that we deeply believe in, it's that we are shifting to agentic interfaces. And this is both a technological and behavioral change in nature. Jasman touched on some of the technological changes that are happening, but if we look at the behavioral side of things, we can see that the funnel is collapsing. Brad, you touched on it. The old world, you ask a question within Google, you're served a set of links. You're going in and viewing that content, and you're interpreting it, and then you decide. Now, answer engines are directly serving these answers up to us, and humans are inherently trusting those answers. So at the end of the day, what we need to care about is what we sort of think of as the holy trinity. It's visibility, specifically in those top and middle of funnel queries. Are you showing up when somebody is asking a question about your industry, your space, or about the products or services you offer? We need to focus on sentiment. So when somebody asks a specific question about your brand or your products, your offerings, what is being said? Is it good, bad, negative? Is it going to cause them to go ask for alternative options? And underpinning all of this is citations. I think another form of visibility, which gets more into how we are actually driving and impacting the narrative around our brand and space.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Before we proceed to the next question, I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, there will be a 15-minute Q&A at the end of this. Please drop any questions that you have in the comments, and we will answer as many as we can during that 15 minutes at the end of this segment. So, Stacey, I'm going to direct this one to you. What do you feel is the biggest misconception you notice that brands have about AI visibility as you work with various clients and have been doing this for quite a while? What is the biggest misconception?
Yeah. So from someone who, is working with clients kind of at all aspects of on the SEO maturity curve, I have to kind of combat this misconception a lot. And it's usually, I feel like the biggest one is that traditional SEO and AI visibility, despite being different, aren't connected at all. And that's just not the case. So the content that performs best today is really built for both traditional search and AI visibility. And I think the struggle is that clients need to understand that it's very easy to create a piece of content that is attractive to both. It needs to be crawlable and indexable and authoritative still. Your brand still needs to be trustworthy like it was before, but the content that you have needs to be written clearly enough and structured in a way that AI systems and LLMs, whether we're talking about Google AIO visibility or ChatGPT or any other LLM, it needs to be structured in a way that AI can extract definitions, explanations, and really create answers without guesswork, because we know a lot of times it's not verbatim quotes, it's actually a paraphrase of multiple different sources. And I think too is that I really want to just touch on 1 second about the trustworthy aspect of the brand. That's always been the case, but I think historically, like brand awareness and kind of investing in your brand, investing in review campaigns and things like that felt optional, and was one of those things that, once you kind of reach a certain level in your marketing, your marketing mix, then you can kind of worry about brand awareness and image, and that's no longer optional. So I'd say that's probably a big change, is that it has moved to the forefront now.
Cool. Thanks, Stacey. I'm going to take that and kind of deep dive a little bit. And I apologize for my voice, everyone. It's the season for the raw throats here. So Ben, I would love to get into some practical steps. Stacey mentioned some of the ways that we need to structure our content. What are some, and somebody actually just asked a question, and thank you for the questions that are coming in, some writing rules to rank for ChatGPT. You may get into this with your answer here, but what are some of the most practical steps that brands should be taking in the next 60 to 90 days to improve visibility for those relevant queries? So you've got this content that's amazing. You've got relevant answers. What do brands need to do over the next 60 to 90 days to make sure that they're doing their best to show up?
I think the first thing is defining focus. You can boil the ocean and you're going to find that the results they're going to be an inch deep and a mile wide. And obviously, to be able to define the focus, you do need some sort of analytics layer within there. But at the end of the day, analytics, as we all know, is just analytics. It's not actually going to change anything. And so analytics for analytics' sake isn't all that exciting. But it does help us define what those focus areas should be. I like to think of AI search strategy a little bit like college, right? You have a major, you have a minor, and then you take all of these extracurricular classes and courses. A brand AI strategy should be very similar, where there are certain content channels or information classes, whether it's owned content, third-party content, or your presence across social channels, that we really want to focus on. Maybe because it's our bread and butter, maybe because we can see that those specific or a specific information class is controlling a large share of the narrative. And with this, we'll actually be able to then impact what we sort of call change management, orienting your teams around the goals and activities that will help you win within AI search. We don't typically see brands setting up internal AEO teams. It's much more around looking at which functions within your marketing organization, whether they're internal or external, if you're partnering with an agency like Level, to make sure that the actual strategies or the actions that you're taking are oriented towards AI search success. So this could be for instance, thinking about your content structure, your own content structure, incorporating semantic URL slugs, thinking about contextualizing information in PDPs, adding rich and semantically rich FAQ pages, thinking about making sure that data is structured and formatted in a way that AI agents can easily interpret it, grab it, and use it within a response.
Cool. So let's dig into the schema bit a little, because people throw around the term schema and some people get it, some people don't get it. What, from an AI visibility standpoint, in simplistic terms, and any of you can answer this, whoever's most excited about schema, what does that mean for the layperson, the marketer that isn't super technical? What is the appropriate schema for AI visibility wins?
I think I can maybe start on this one.
Yeah.
So again, at Profound, just to contextualize, we work with some of the largest enterprises in the world who are also trying to figure out how to market their pages to AI agents, right? As Ben touched on a little bit earlier, the websites that you see today that you and I visit are designed for our attention, but AI agents have their own preferences and things that appeal to them. The way in which ChatGPT specifically decides to go look at a page and decide that it might have compelling content is actually quite formulaic. There are 4 fields roughly that it looks at when making a decision on what pages to go visit, and then evaluating the substance of those pages. But before it, even evaluates the substance, it's being sold a page, right? It's seeing the box of it and saying, okay, that looks interesting, I'll go check that one out. And the things that it's looking at are your titles and H1s, your semantic URL. So your URL slug that we describe when we talk about a semantic URL, what that actually means is, instead of saying Nike.com/ABC F57, whatever the product UUID is, Nike.com/best running shoes for men is going to be a semantic URL that very clearly markets the page to an agent. It's going to tell an agent what it should expect to find if it visits that page, right? So that's another sort of field you can use to market. And then the other one is your meta description. So richly describing the content and context that exists on your page. And some of this will sound familiar to people who have experience in the SEO world, right? These are some of the similar overlapping things, but the thing that is under-indexed on is their importance for getting an AI agent to feel compelled enough to even go evaluate the content on your page. So I would say those are sort of like the high-level easy pickings that you can use. When you start to get to on-page schema, we're thinking about things like markdown text. We're thinking about natural language formed questions. So instead of saying, the top 10 X for Y, what might be a better way of framing that question of the substance of that article is, what are the best running shoes for marathons? Because guess what? That matches the typical query intent of a user in ChatGPT looking for answers to that question. So there's lots of, tips and tricks, and we could spend a whole hour talking about these things, but hopefully that's a helpful teaser for like some of the things that we think about.
Yeah, that's great. I'll stick with you, Jasmine, for one moment. And, we talked about this a little bit, but what changes are you seeing in how platforms like AI Overviews, ChatGPT, Claude, the Perplexity, what changes are you seeing in how they're selecting sources when they're citing things?
I think of them all as like little kids who each have like their own preferences. Like one kid might like brownies, another one might like cookies, but they still just like their own things. And so like maybe more discreetly, Google, because YouTube is a subsidiary of it, heavily cites YouTube across Gemini, Google AI Overviews, and AI Mode. And so we see that as the number 1 most cited domain actually for Google properties. And again, that's a unique preference for Google because of their relationship with YouTube. But we find that other LLMs, very heavily index on Reddit and Wikipedia. Those are between the top 1 or top 2 cited sources across ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google as well. And so, you sort of see similar preferences in terms of how can we ground the answers that users receive in something that feels truthy, right? It's very hard to mass manipulate Wikipedia and Reddit at scale. And so when answer engines are looking for what's a reliable place for me to start my search on this topic, they have often landed at, they've sort of converged at the same answer, which is if you go to large libraries of user-generated content, it's very hard to, fake that at that sort of scale. So those are sort of some of the preferences we see at like a content type level. Some of the things we observe as actually like changes in preference over time. So back in August, one of the big trends was listicles, or sort of comparative posts where you would do like top 10 best running shoes for men, top 10 X or Y, best gadgets for the holidays, etc. And we find that those pieces of content are actually performing less amazingly than they were back in August. As of November, we find that like ChatGPT specifically has shifted its preferences more towards blog and opinion pieces of content. And so the sort of deviation there is, instead of comparing 10 different things at a superficial level, give me the richest content and most authoritative and comprehensive source for one specific thing, right? So that's sort of the change now, which is, I think, like the big overarching takeaway here is being the comprehensive, most authoritative answer on the internet to a specific question is the way you get cited, not necessarily trying to be, as Ben described, an inch deep and a mile wide.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm going to bring up a slide here as I ask this next one. This will be for everybody. I'll start again with you, Stacy, if you don't mind. We're looking at a very different search engine results experience than, we had 2 years ago, even that, you now have AI overviews, and you have paid ads, and you have SERP features, and then you finally get to that traditional number one. So as we talk about all this, when you're thinking about search results that include blue links, AI summary, product ads, citations, like what do you feel an effective full funnel search strategy at a high level actually looks like today? Because we're talking about a lot of things and it can be very overwhelming, right? So how do we make our world smaller as marketers, stay focused, have an effective strategy across all of this? And where do most brands, sort of still get it wrong?
Yeah, I would say that really it's about the connected experience. So I think that historically there's been a lot of time spent on, making sure there is a unique campaign strategy for each channel. And there's definitely different types of content that perform well for each channel. That I'm not arguing. But you would not believe how often that we see disconnect between what's going on from a paid ad campaign perspective, from an organic search campaign perspective, from a social media perspective, from a marketing automation and nurture perspective. And I think one of the biggest ways that brands still get it wrong today is that they think that like it's a one channel fits all strategy and that they can't play in all of the different places. And that's absolutely not the case. It's about figuring out basically, what do you want to show? What do you want to grow visibility for? Hard stop. And then based on what the answer is to that question, you develop the mix of marketing activities needed to grow that visibility, whether it's a combined paid search and organic content strategy, whether or not we need to develop relationships with third-party publishers and have that as part of our strategy. So it's really about like just making sure that we are providing the channels with the content that performs the best on them, but aligning that whole experience so it's really connected and we're all like saying the same thing across channels.
Yeah, we have a visual up here now that talks about it. The consumer no longer really cares, right? They want trusted information, but they don't care whether it necessarily comes from a paid ad, from an AI result, from a traditional result. They just are asking a question and they want an answer. And when they get that experience back, they want to feel like this is a great answer. it's relevant to what I asked, and I trust the source, right? So like, I think it's interesting. And also you find efficiencies. When you think about this as one experience, you can find efficiencies in how you're allocating dollars toward, toward your paid ads and things like that. And we've seen that time and again. So a really good point, Stacey. Ben, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think when I was back in third or fourth grade, just learning about the Revolutionary War, they'd show like historical documentaries of the sides moving in tandem, right? All sides, there'd be like 100 people lined up, would just move closer together. To some extent, that has to be the approach across, for performance within AI search and other channels that don't necessarily impact AI search, like paid ads. Jasmine and Stacey have talked about these different information classes or marketing functions, own content, off-page content, social, that impact your performance and visibility within AI search. Not only do we have to be focused on all of those channels, but you have to have the same messaging and the same activities across them all. Even if you think about paid ads, which paid ads don't really impact your performance within AI search. If we are running a paid ads campaign that has completely different messaging than what we are getting across or we are executing in our owned, earned, or social strategies, well, there's going to be a disconnect when somebody sees a response about us and then when they see an ad about us as well. We want to make sure the messaging is moving in tandem or moving in parallel, whether it has a direct impact on your visibility in AI search, or whether it's coming through a marketing channel that is a little bit more ancillary relative to AI search.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Jasmine, anything to add to that in terms of the full funnel strategy?
I think in terms of like an SEO analogy, people used to think about like top of funnel queries and bottom of funnel queries. And I think that's one way of thinking about it. But one thing to consider is that when people go to answer engines like ChatGPT, they're doing a lot of their discovery and consideration. And so these funnels can go from lower in the funnel to back up in the funnel to lower in the funnel to back up in the funnel. So these user journeys are a lot more messy and complicated than they ever have been. In an SEO world, you might look up best running shoes, go to Nike.com, then click purchase the shoe. And that's like a neat funnel. It's something we like to look at because it makes sense to us. That's not really what's happening anymore. And I think people have this like constrained view of neat funnels in the marketing lifecycle, which is comforting to us. But I actually don't think that's what's happening, right? People go to a commercial question, then they go back up to informational in ChatGPT because information retrieval is so quick and instant. You can synthesize things like this, right? And so if I can do all this discovery and legwork at scale very quickly, why do I need to go drop myself low in the funnel so easily? The answer is that you don't. Right. And I think that's like a discomforting thought to many marketers. But like, I think that's the fundamental truth of where we're headed, which is like discovery can go to commercial and commercial can go back up to discovery in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jasmine. So jumping into, our last couple questions here, we've got some really great Q&A questions too. I'm excited to get to in a bit. Ben, I'll ask this of you to start here. If brands can only focus on one area, if you've got a small team, you have a small budget, if brands can only focus on one area first, whether it's content structure, technical SEO, brand authority, what would you focus on first or advise others to focus on first, and why would that be?
Yeah. So I think you first need to listen to the data. Because again, if we look and citations are gravitating towards a certain information class or content type, then we want to listen to that and not say, hey, this is, and just go in with an idea or a preconceived notion of what we have to focus on. So what I would say is generally to begin with, listen to the data. But if we're out here picking sides, what I would say is content structure and technical SEO at the end of the day do go hand in hand. And that's what I think you have to focus on first. You could have great brand authority and contextual content. But at the end of the day, if the AI engine or the AI agent can't read it, well, then you're SOL. So what I would say is fundamentals and content structure are very similar in the fact that it is very easy to do both at the same time, even if you don't have a large team. A great example of this is, and I'm going to butcher the name of the blog, but there is so when we built a configuration for a fast food company in the burger space, we saw that there is this guy's blog, call it Dave's Burgers, that was the top cited blog or top cited citation source in the space. And it's not coming from Eater or The Infatuation or any large food related blog or media publication. It was this one guy who went around to every single fast food chain in the nation, national, regional, local, and created a very structured and detailed evaluation of every individual burger that he had coming from each restaurant. It was structured in a way where it was very, very easy to read. He had good technical or SEO technicals, so it was very easy to read it. And then it came into the content structure. Patty weight, amount of poppy seeds per bun, how many slices of the raw onions on the burger. All of this was very, very specific detail that he included that AI answer engines loved because there's nowhere else to find that. Whether they're trying to find it on a site that had ton of brand authority or a site that had really good technical SEOs. And so he mixed the two in a pretty simple way, and it was just him. So if I were to say two, it'd be technical SEO, call it SEO fundamentals as well, which sort of go hand in hand. And then the content structure side of things, another very important piece to think about.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. That's great. Stacy, rounding us out here before we get to the Q&A, what advice do you give clients who have strong traditional rankings, but minimal, limited presence, no presence in AI? I know we get this a lot, right? We have a lot of clients who are like, hey, we've done great work in the traditional space, but we are not showing up in AI generated answers.
Yeah. So I would say it's likely because your content is optimized just to be found and not like I feel like we said earlier, not to be summarized or served or paraphrased. Many high ranking pages perform well in traditional rankings because they explain something clearly and thoroughly. But that doesn't mean that the content is easy to be summarized, paraphrased, reused, or that it even contains what people care about. With all the clients that we have lots of clients who have like spent time and energy and effort into putting together long form content. Long form doesn't necessarily mean AI friendly. So I would say take a look at your content, look to see what you can do to restructure it for AI search. Can you use tables? Can you make headings? Can you read every single heading and scan down the page and walk away from that page and not need to read a single other thing? When can you put in tables for comparisons? What data is actually important that like you didn't push back on legal when they said you couldn't put in enrollment rates for a particular city, like push back now, right? Because if you're not putting in that kind of data, it's getting it from somewhere else. And that's like that, the information that people want, I'm going to use higher ed as an example, like that information, that's not different. Like people still want to know tuition rates. People still want to know what the outlook is after they graduate. We now have to be the one that provides that information because if we don't, we're not going to get cited.
Cool. And then, obviously start with opportunity. We, Ben, I think you touched on this, like look at the data, start with opportunity. If you're on page 2 for certain things in traditional space, go after those things. If you see that people are asking particular questions in your chat, if you've got a chat feature set up, use that to answer those questions really clearly. So use all that data to really grasp those opportunities and focus on those opportunities, and don't try to do everything all at once. So this has been great. We're going to move into our Q&A portion of things. Before we do that, there is a QR code here on the screen. You can scan that and sign up for a free AI visibility scorecard from the team here at Level, working with our partners like Profound. And so that's completely free. Just a quick scorecard to say, hey, here are some quick things we would recommend. Here's how you're currently set up for success. But let's go to the Q&A. We have a few things here that have been starred for us. We have Jess asking, what are the top old truths that we need to let go of in order to move forward? You mentioned one already, which is that you have to fight for the top 3 SERP spots in order to be successful. What are some other old truths that we should let go of?
Anyone in particular want to start?
I can start. I think, again, going back to sort of the SEO world, the things that people optimized for were to game human attention. So I think like even if you thought about like a paid search strategy, people were bidding on keywords like your competitors' keywords if they had more traffic than you. And so you were spending yourself penniless to try and show up in a competition where, again, all that mattered was being on the top 3 results or the top half of the Google SERP. And I think even as we start to reorient to a world with, ads, for example, in ChatGPT, the nature of how you capture attention for humans is by proxy of capturing attention for agents. I think maybe put more discreetly, when users are talking to LLMs, they have very rich and explicit preferences that they express. So instead of saying, I need running shoes to Google, I'm going to ChatGPT and saying, I have flat feet, I'm running a marathon for 10 miles, or I guess it's 26 miles maybe. I wish I knew how many miles were in a marathon. I'm running a marathon and my feet hurt. Help me, find shoes that work for me. And when ChatGPT gets that prompt, it's turning it into a search query, going to some search index, most likely Google, and then looking up relevant results out of the top 100 results for that query. And so I think really it's almost the most important thing that I can really hammer home here is that like you don't need to care about showing up in that top 10 result set or even top 20. Like your position bears basically no influence to your ability to get cited. And so that's why you see such random pieces of content getting picked up and returned to you as a user in ChatGPT, relative to if you went to Google, you were going to find like the stereotypical players. You're going to find Foot Locker. You're going to find Champ Sports. You're going to find Nike. And like, that's not what our new world looks like. And so the sort of transitive to that is that like small sites with valuable and unique authoritative content that do the best job of answering a question on the internet have the best chance in the history of the internet to show up and reach users, right? So I think like, if anything, what I would say is like, this should leave you with a message of like hope and optimism that like, if you are not already an enterprise with huge amounts of domain authority, you still have a chance. Agents are actually a great net positive for you.
Yeah, especially for very specific answers, right? That others may not be answering, even if they're huge. That's great. Another question that came in is, how much do LLMs crawl sponsored advertising, and how do they rank these answers in terms of trustworthiness? Who wants to take this one?
To our knowledge, very little.
Yeah.
Obviously, OpenAI is rolling out ads itself. You had the chief of Gemini, or DeepMind, I guess, within Google yesterday, say that they're going to take a different approach. But certainly the net of it is that things are always changing. My guess is any sponsored ads across any platform, whether it's Amazon, whether it's within a domain like Walmart, aren't going to get picked up very often, if at all, by agents. They see that as non-trustworthy, non-authentic, non-organic content. So there's a negligible chance that it has an impact on your AI search performance. That being said, we do have and have seen instances where brands are sponsoring long-form content coming from key third-party partners or publishers. And when it's not presented in the form of an ad, it can certainly have an impact on visibility. But if we're thinking, true paid ads, I don't think you're going to see very much, if any, impact on your AI visibility.
Cool.
Yeah, but I would say that's not, and I agree with you, but also kind of tying back to what we had said at the beginning about like making sure we have a full, like a robust digital marketing experience. Like, it's okay that your paid ads aren't going to be what's served, because that's not the purpose of that content. So like, we talk about obviously LLMs and ChatGPT, and it is for the first time ever making a dent in Google's like search market share, so to speak. But the majority of people, I mean, just based off of the default settings on your phone. Like most people are still going to a search engine and seeing ads. So that's why it's so important to be doing both things, to be looking at your content and making content and restructuring content for AI visibility. But I wouldn't neglect creating a bottom funnel search campaign because many users are still going that route. So I would say, to Ben's point, yeah, it's not going to be cited, but that's not its purpose. So really understanding, what the purpose is. And for paid search, it's once you're paying for someone and you capture that click and their attention, your landing page better be out of this world, because that's what you need in order to convert them. And that's the content that matters for a paid search user.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, one thing, thinking about the content, and this is just a question that I have to kind of piggyback off that. Something that I see that we're experiencing is that initially it was okay to kind of generate blogs using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and brush them up a bit, and they could still win. And we're actually finding, and Jasmine and Ben, let me know if this is the same with you, like the more humanized these things can be, they are starting to become more trustworthy to some of these AI engines. Are you seeing the same thing? I call that out because as we talk about content, like yes, AI powered, AI supported, but still the humanized element is, we're starting to see some of that like becoming more important yet again.
I can take a crack at this first. I think at a very high level, the thing to understand about AI generated content, it is using a corpus of information that already exists in the world, right? So fundamentally, you are not creating net new knowledge as of today's state of models, which means that when you restructure old knowledge, you either need to do the best job of packaging it up in a presentable format that agents really like, or you need to differentiate on the substance itself if you're not going to differentiate on the structure of that content, right? So just to be very, very explicit about this, I think when people try to, create a blog post with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT goes to 10 websites on the internet and says, okay, I learned everything I need to know about this, topic. I can now go write this article for you, and then presents you an article. It has just regurgitated what it has found on those 10 pages in probably a structure that is also less compelling than anything on those 10 pages. And so either you need to, as the human in the loop, differentiate on the unique value of the substance you can create and provide for that topic, or on the structure in which you market it to agents.
That's awesome. That's a really, really good point. I think about the movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton, where all of the copies of him keep getting worse and worse. So we want to make sure that we make them better and better, right?
I think if I can add to that, everybody that we've seen succeed in AI search takes a human in the loop approach to content generation. You certainly have AI models that are, and we've seen, the other side of it, where there's sites, like one called Toxagon, where it's fully AI generated content. I mean, literally word for word what Jasmine described, that flew up and became very highly cited across a ton of different industries. And then it got penalized super heavily, and now it's not cited at all. So AI search is definitely penalizing fully AI generated content that doesn't have a human in the loop, or hasn't had a human in the loop in a meaningful way. That being said, AI search also penalizes bad human created content as well. And so it isn't necessarily, hey, should it be AI generated or human generated? It should be, hey, how can we get to creating great content that, as Jasmine described, adds value and knowledge to the world that isn't previously known or wasn't previously made very clear to the agents.
Cool. Stacey, something else to add there?
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of it comes down to what we define as humanization. I think in the past, humanizing content typically meant find an editor or a really good writer and have them, rewrite a piece or edit a piece through their lens. There were certain expectations, right, of that content. And now I think it's different. For today's average user, a humanized piece of content means that it's clear, it's concise, It includes valuable information to the person searching, not valuable information to the company providing that piece of content. It's like Ben and Yasmin said, like it's unique and it has some sort of POV, right? That cannot be paraphrased from what's already out there. So like that includes me, like, for example, the kind of the resurgence of author profiles and having kind of like that expert lens, like that's a differentiator, right? Like if you're a client or an organization that has experts in the field at their fingertips who are willing to contribute their 2 cents to that content, that's what we want to make sure that we're incorporating. So human doesn't mean necessarily flowery writing or, sentence structure, like that's part of it. But a lot of it is also just like, is it helpful? Is it helpful? Is it useful? Will it help someone make a decision?
Yeah. The last thing I want to touch on here is, and Evan, if you could go ahead and pull up the thank you with the QR code again. So if people need to drop off, they have access to that for, again, the free visibility scorecard. Also, I just want to mention everybody who has registered for this, we're going to send out a little survey. Would love to get some feedback on this topic and your feedback on what would be valuable in the future, so that as we prepare these, we're taking that input and we want to make sure we're making content here that is incredibly valuable for you. But the last question here before we wrap, and thank you everybody, is from an AEO and SEO perspective, what KPIs should we be thinking about as we measure success? So Ben, I see you nodding, so I'm going to you first on this one.
I think there's a couple things. I think, there isn't as defined of a set of metrics like there has been in SEO for 20 years, partially because this is a new space, a new channel, and everybody's learning how to do it as we sort of try and fly the plane. I think we think about a couple things internally here, and I know you guys think about things in a very similar way. It's about visibility. So how are you showing up in the top and middle of funnel queries that are, let's say, non-branded? Sentiment, which is thinking about, call it the ratio of positive to negative aspects of an answer when somebody asks a specific question about your brand. And then it's the citations. How much of the narrative are you controlling, whether it's coming from your own content, your presence across social channels or earned media channels, et cetera. And then finally, what we also want to be thinking about is the referral side of things as well. We call this world zero click. We host, some events and you'll hear us call it zero click. In actuality, it's not zero click. I can just talk about Profound's website. We're seeing, I think, right around 12,000, real human referrals coming from ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, et cetera, on a weekly basis. So people are certainly clicking through, and on average, those are higher intent conversions. And so that's the final thing to sort of be thinking about if you're really focused on mapping out that ROI and building out a, call it, lead categorization funnel.
That's a great point, Ben. We talk a lot about how conversion rate optimization is more important than ever with traffic that is coming to your site that is probably very, very high intent, more so than ever before. Jasmine, Stacy, last words on KPIs or anything else?
I think Ben hit the nail on the head, so I'll let him have the last word on that topic.
All right. Well, Stacy, Jasmine, Ben, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks everybody for attending. We will be sharing a recording. We will be sharing a survey. Please take a moment to get your free AI visibility scorecard, and we will see you all very, very soon.
Thank you.